to the soil sampling, soil conditioning webinar. Thank you so much for joining us for this timely webinar, where we are going to be discussing an issue that is topical during this time of the season in light of us increasing crop productivity and crop profitability. So in this presentation, I'm going to give the first half of the presentation. My name is Wendy Madzura. I'm with CITCO. And the second half of the presentation, we are going to get from Mr. Emmanuel Chikwari, who is a soil science specialist at the Ministry of Agriculture, so that you get a holistic view of what soil sampling and soil conditioning is, as well as the soil sampling, as well as the soil conditioning agents that are available on the market. So now I'm going to share my screen. So as we start the presentation, a few housekeeping issues. This presentation is going to be recorded. Once it's been recorded, we're going to share the link so that you can further view it if you want to refer to it at a later date. Then we are also inviting questions in the chat box that we are going to respond to at the end of the presentation to make the presentation more interactive. To make it more interactive, we can start off by splitting the questions. After my presentation, I'll take the first set of questions that will have come through before we move on to the second half of the presentation, where we are going to have Mr. Chikwari giving us a more detailed explanation of the importance of soil sampling and soil conditioning. So to start off, we want to look at the essential elements that contribute to increased crop production. In crop production, farmers are encouraged to understand the importance of the genetics. The genetics play a pivotal role in increasing crop productivity in the sense that this is the backbone of any cropping venture. If you have the genetics right, then you need to employ the good agronomic practices that are going to unlock the genetic potential and add value to the cropping venture that you will have embarked on. Outside of that, we also know that the weather plays a pivotal role in increasing crop production, where we find that weather elements such as sunlight, water, which speaks to rainfall, particularly when we talk about farmers who are doing rain-fed agriculture, as well as the temperatures, which also contribute to the heat units that are experienced and required for crop production. Then we also look at management, where you find that in some instances, farmers may receive the same inputs at the same time under the same ecological regions, but still they produce different results. This is to do with the management practices that they employ, which may differ in such a way that some farmers may be doing the correct thing, some farmers may be lacking, some may be cell phone farmers who are rarely at the farm or taking a practical approach at the farm. So this would then show in the results that they get, the yield reduction that they get will also be an indication of poor management. So on management, we speak about the issues to do with good agronomic practices. And the good agronomic practices, they also encompass soil nutrition and soil management. So today we want to talk at great length about the soil, because soil is the main growing media that we have for most of our crops, particularly here in Zimbabwe. So we want to speak about the importance of soil management, because soil is a living entity that needs to be taken care of for it to give back and make sure that our crops are growing optimally and well. So looking at the soil is one of the most basic resources required for crop production. It is the main medium where our crops grow, and it is made up of very small rock particles, organic matter, microorganisms, air and water, and the proportions of these and many other related factors have an impact on the potential for crop production. So the soil conditions that favor crop production may include, number one, the fertility, where we look at issues to do with the crop's pH level, the crop's nutrition level, which have an impact on the growth of the particular crop that we're going to be establishing. We also speak about the depth and the drainage. the depth of the soil, the root zone, the topsoil, the subsoil, the zones that are available in the soil. And we also speak about the drainage, where we also mention issues to do with the texture of the soil, sandy soils, clay soils. All this needs to be taken account of so that you understand the importance of soil conditioning. So we also go into the issues to do with the farmer's management, where the farmer needs to understand the soil microbes that exist and how they can further manage them to benefit from them. They need to also understand the problematic weed species that are available in the soil, as well as the soil-borne pests and diseases that might cause hindrances in crop production. So the two basic universal limiting factors of soil for crop production are the supply of water, the ability to supply nutrients as well. This is a pivotal issue. Then the other factors that affect crop productivity. These are the physical limitations, such as the depth that we mentioned, shallow root zones, which are to do with issues to do with compaction layer in the soil, which may affect the root penetration into the soil, as well as the water infiltration into the soil. And then we also look at issues to do with the aeration, the lack of aeration in the soil that might come with waterlogged conditions, particularly in seasons where we have persistent rains that might not allow the drainage of the water to go down enough for us to then have good aeration. We also speak about issues to do with erosion, because when soil erosion occurs, we find that sometimes the topsoil may be washed away and reducing the root zone where our crops want to grow. And it might wash away as well the soil that has good organic matter that is required for crop production. So this is important. And this also speaks to our ability to understand the principles of conservation agriculture, where we speak about the three principles of minimum soil disturbance, permanent ground cover, and crop rotations in a bid to safeguard our soils and make sure that we do not incur unnecessary soil erosion on the surface of the soil, leading to lower crop productivity. The adverse chemical conditions may include the soil acidity, soil alkalinity, as well as the soil salinity. These may affect the uptake of nutrients from the soil and affect fertilizer use efficiency, which you will see as we go down with the presentation. And when we get Mr. Chikwari to come in, he's also going to explain further on this regards. So farmers are encouraged to sample their soils for effective nutrient management. Soil sampling. Why is it important to do soil sampling or to take soil samples? If you want to farm profitably, you need to understand the media that you're going to be using. What benefit is it for you to buy all the inputs that are required and apply them to soils that have not been analyzed, only to find out at harvesting that probably the pH was acidic to such an extent that the fertilizers that you might have applied did not work to the extent that was desired, and the results were dismal? You need to come in with soil analysis to check for imbalances in terms of the pH level. You need to come with soil analysis to check the nutrient status of the soil. Here we are speaking about the full nutrient test, where the general misconception is that soil analysis is when you come in to analyze the soil acidity only and get to know whether your soils need a lime or do not need lime. But you need to go a step further if you want to take farming as a formidable business and understand the nutrient constitution of the soil, the macro elements, nitrogen, phosphorus, and potash, the trace elements or micro elements, your sulfur, your calcium, your magnesium. You need to get to a level where you understand such, as well as the exchange capacity of your soil and the organic matter of your soil. Did you know that the organic matter of the soil has a relationship with the amount of fertilizer that you're going to apply? Where soils with a high organic matter, you might apply lower fertilizer rates compared to soils that have poor organic matter. So you also need to understand that soil nutrition goes beyond just your understanding of the nutrient constitution, but further to the exchange capacity as well as the organic constitution of your soil, organic matter constitution of your soil, which speaks to the carbon levels as well as the levels of carbon that are going to be in your soil for crop production. You also need to check in terms of issues to do with the soil analysis being linked to 4 principal elements. The right type. You need to make sure that you are analyzing to get the right type of fertilizer that you're going to be using. This will give you a custom-made fertilizer recommendation, where you need to understand that soils are different. Even in one field, in one farm, you can get different soil levels. So you need to understand the type of fertilizer that is custom-made to meet the requirements of the crop in question, as well as the soil conditions that are prevailing. The right quantities. Farming nowadays, there's talk of farming as a business. So in any business venture, you need to understand the dynamics of the return per dollar invested, which we refer to as the profitability. So this can only come from your deeper understanding of the issues to do with the quantities of fertilizer that are going to be required. Some farmers may go for the general or blanket recommendations of fertilizer, which say maybe you require 6 to 8 bags. Then because they think they are in business, they want to go for the upper limits. They take 8 bags of fertilizer and apply on soils that required only 5 bags of fertilizer, which means the return per dollar invested has been affected by the increase in costs that we have incurred, which was not necessary. So it's important for us to do a cost-benefit analysis, which is linked to soil analysis, where we get an understanding of the actual rates and quantities of fertilizer that the crop is requiring. We also need to understand the time, the different types of soil conditioners that are going to be applied, when they should be applied, how they are going to be applied. Then when we look at fertilizer, the different types of fertilizers that are going to be used, be they compound, top dressing fertilizers, are they straights, are they blends, or are they compounded fertilizers? All this speaks to your understanding of your soil condition, so that you can come in with the best results. So the NPK uptake efficiency versus pH levels. By pH, we are referring to the potential hydrogen of the soil. The hydrogen percentage in the soil, which affects the uptake of nutrients, whereby you find that if soils are acidic to a certain extent, they will then affect the availability of nutrients that are required by our crop production and crop growth. But Mr. Chukwari is going to further explain these issues and further demystify some of the misconceptions that might exist in terms of pH, as well as the liming agents that are available on the market. But just to highlight briefly, say for example, you have a pH of 4.5. By the way, the recommended pH level ranges from 5.5 to 6.5, where it can stretch up to 6.8 and start from around 5.3. But we know that for all crops, if your pH ranges between 5.5 to 6.5, chances are any crop is going to benefit from the maximum fertilizer use efficiency that's going to come at that pH range. As you can see there on the shaded chart, the graph that you are seeing there, we are seeing that at 4.5, fertilizer use efficiency can drop down to around 30%, especially for elements such as phosphorus, which is a key macro element because it contributes to the root structure, to the development of healthy roots that are going to be used for the uptake of nutrients, of water. So it's important for us to get a good foundation and get our soils right so that maximum fertilizer use efficiency is achieved from an early stage, from establishment of the crop. You also find that at a pH level of 5, this is a calcium chloride scale, you find that the pH is going to affect the fertilizer use efficiency to around 30 to 40% and 50% for potassium. And at 5.5, that's when we start reaping the benefits of analyzing soils and getting them limed to a pH level that is desired, where 77% of the nutrients are going to be utilized by the crop to give the desired results. Then at 6% to 6.8, that's where we get optimum fertilizer use efficiency. achieving 100% at 6.5% for most crops. So which is to say, farmers should aim to have a pH level of 5.5 to 6.5. This range allows for you to be coming in, if you have achieved this range, if your soils that are within this range, you are encouraged to maintain that pH range at that level so that you do not risk it falling outside of the desired zone and then start wanting to build it back to where it was. So maintenance, liming can come in at an interval of about 2 years or once every year, depending on the rates and depending on the actual pH level that you are sitting on. Then we want to talk about issues to do with the do's and don'ts when taking soil samples. We spoke about the why. Now we want to talk about the do's and the don'ts. Soil analysis is only as good as the sample on which it is based. This statement is loaded in the sense that anyone can do soil analysis. Anyone can take a soil sample from the field. But the results, the reliability of the results is going to be determined by the analysis method that was used and the way in which the sample was taken and the number of samples that were taken, depending on the variations that existed in the particular sampling zone. So it's important for us to know that soil sampling, soil analysis is only as good as the sample on which it was based. So we'll start off with what you should not do, and then we'll end with what you should do, so that what you should do will stick and we'll be able to keep it as a top of mind awareness. You need to avoid sampling on areas with bias. So areas with bias can include anthills, areas with different soil types, areas with ash, because ash also has mineral elements attributed to it, as you will hear further on in the presentation coming next. Fertilizer mixing points, you need to avoid them because this will give you a bias and the impression that your soils are healthy or the pH level is at a certain point where it might not be because of just one localized area. So you need to avoid such. Also avoid sampling on the soil surface where there is debris as well as humus, because this might affect the actual nutrient constitution that you want to assess. Rather, you need to sample within the root zone so that you get good results. Also avoid contaminating the sample by using empty fertilizer bags for collection, because fertilizer is a mineral. It might also add and bring about variations in the soil so that when you get the results, they'll be biased. Now we go to what you should do. You need to sample soils every 3 years or more often if nutrient removal is high. If you're doing multiple cropping, you find that nutrient removal might be higher than for a farmer who's only doing rain-fed agriculture and coming in once to analyze their soils because they are coming in once to plant their crops. So analysis should also be guided by a cropping plan. You need to sample soils you need to sample soils 3 months before the next season for you to get effective soil conditioning in place, especially for acidic soils. And then on the sampling depth, aim to achieve a sampling depth of 15 to 20 centimeters. This would be within the rooting zone for most crops. So this will be quite beneficial for you to analyze the soil within that zone. You need to take 15 to 20 samples per hectare or be guided by field variations. And you also need to mix. You also need to make sure that once you've taken the sub-samples from the different areas, you need to mix the samples to get a representative sample from the field and take 1 kg for analysis. 1 kg, ladies and gentlemen, is enough for you to analyze your soil. You do not need to take 5 kgs, 10 kgs, or a 50 kg bag of soil for analysis to the research station. Rather, only a kg should suffice. But you need to make sure that you also tie it, seal it well, so that by the time it reaches the analysis point, it is still with ample volume for them to analyze and give you good results. Then the last thing that you need to take note of, or you need to do, is to make sure that you label clearly on the sample. Sometimes you find that if you're going to label on the sample, if it's a plastic bag and you're going to write with the marker, by the time the sample reaches its desired destination, that marker will have faded and that sample will not be able to be identified. So you need to write on a piece of paper and throw it inside the sample and make sure that you have labeled in a way that you understand based on the variations or in the soil samples that have been taken, so that when the results come in, you do the correct remedial measures based on the different variations that might exist. Moving on, we want to talk about how to take a soil sample from the field. The field area to be sampled, first and foremost, you need to gather information on where you're going to be doing the soil sampling. Then from a visual assessment, you can tell whether you have sandy soils, clay soils, loam soils. Different soils need to be sampled differently and produce different sampling packets. So you also need to take note of the time of sampling. You need to sample your soils well in advance of the season, as already has been explained in the previous slide. So during this time, when most farmers have harvested their crops, this is when we recommend for you to take soil samples for analysis so that you get the results on time and make the necessary corrections on time so that you can benefit from them. The sampling tools that can be used, they are different, but suffice to say, you do not need any sophisticated tools to analyze your soils. Yes, there is a sampling auger that you can use, but you can also use a hoe, or you can come in with a spade, depending on the firmness of the soil that you're going to be analyzing, and take a slice of soil so that you take it for analysis, as you are seeing there on the picture. So the pictures that you are seeing there are just depicting what you need to do during soil analysis. First and foremost, you need to clear the top part of the soil so that you do not end up having a sample that has humus, debris, organic matter that is going to affect the results that you are going to get. Then when you are sampling, you need to go to a depth of 20 to 30, like we have said, and take a slice of the soil from the root zone. Then you don't just sample at one point. For soils that are similar, you take different sampling points. And then the sampling depth that you're going to be using, we've already explained. The amount of samples would depend on the variations that exist. But as a rough rule of thumb, samples from a hectare of similar soil, you can take about 10 samples. But you can also increase when you increase the number of sub-samples that you're going to take to about 15 to 20, this also increases the efficiency of the sampling block that you're going to be doing, as well as it reduces the bias that might exist. So it also makes your sample more closer to home in terms of the conditions that exist in the fields. Then you also need to take note of the sampling process, how you're going to be doing it. Some farmers may sample using a Z method, where they'll be sampling different points, working in a Z pattern in their field. Some might do a W method, where they will be sampling, working in a W pattern to get their soil samples. But some farmers might choose to say, the more the merrier. So they might choose to take sub-samples from random points in their fields. These random points will be of similar soil outlook, and then this will be mixed to produce one sample. And then this sample will be taken for analysis. It's also important, like we said earlier on, to label on the sample so that you get the good results that are based on the particular area that has been analyzed. Then moving on, we want to talk about soil conditioning. Soil conditioning is when you come in with the different fertilizers to apply into your soil so that it is brought to a particular level where it is able to avail the necessary nutrients that a crop requires for effective production. A well-conditioned soil has high fertilizer use efficiency. Optimum pH ranges for most crops are from 5.5 to 6.5 on a calcium chloride scale. So you need to also understand that soil conditioning reduces the availability of toxic elements such as aluminium and manganese, which may become toxic to the crop to an extent that the crop may fail to grow to its desired results. It also improves soil structure, and it gives greater root proliferation, and it improves nutrient uptake. It also promotes the existence of beneficial soil microbes. Because nowadays there's talk of us doing agriculture more sustainably, where we need to be conscious of our environment. So these beneficial microbes have a role to play in the ecosystem. We need to safeguard them and make sure that we do our best to let them contribute to the ecosystem without damaging the environment in which they exist. But the most important thing is to understand that in lime, there are different liming agents that can be used. You can use gypsum. You can use, when we're looking at lime, there are different lime types that exist. The two most commonly used ones are calcitic lime and dolomitic lime. Calcitic lime has calcium and the bicarbonate element, which is going to fix the pH if the soil is acidic to a level which is not desired for crop production. While the dolomitic lime has magnesium and calcium and the bicarbonate element, which is going to fix the pH if it is an acidic level still. Then you find that you also need to understand that if you do a full nutrient analysis, it's recommended for you to know the calcium level of your soil. Once you know the calcium level of your soil, the calcium that is required is going to guide your choice of lime. If your soils are deficient in calcium, you need to come in with calcitic lime. If your soils are deficient in magnesium, you need to come in with dolomitic lime, where you get your magnesium, calcium, and the fixation of the pH level at one go. So it will be a one-size-fits-all, depending on the soil type that you have, as well as the nutrients that are in your soil. So understand that there are two soil liming agents, calcitic lime and dolomitic lime. These are the most commonly used ones. Then we go to gypsum. Gypsum is a soil conditioner because it brings calcium that is beneficial for our crop. But gypsum, as the name suggests, when you break it down, is calcium sulfate. Calcium sulfate does not have the ability to fix acidic soils and bring them up to the pH level that is desired. Yes, they can be used, the gypsum can be used in the event that soils are on the alkaline side to try and condition them to bring them to a good range. But for soils, particularly in Zimbabwe, our soils are bordering on being very acidic to acidic rather than them being on the alkaline side. So please do not use gypsum as a liming agent, but rather as a soil conditioner. Then we move on to speak about fertilizer management. The fertilizer types that exist, we have organic and inorganic fertilizers. The organic fertilizers are the fertilizers that we get from our composting, our manure. The inorganic ones are your fertilizers, the ones that we buy, the compounds, the straights, the blends. Those are the inorganic fertilizers. On the straight fertilizers, usually they come in with one element that is meant to address a particular need, or they are used, these straight fertilizers, to develop the compounds, to develop the blends, which can then further be used at, depending on the crop's needs. Then we have basal fertilizers, where they have macro elements as well as a few trace elements. And we also find that these can come in the form of compounds as well as blends. Then on top dressing fertilizers, we usually speak about ammonium nitrate, which has a 34.5% nitrogen constitution, and urea, which has a 46% nitrogen constitution. These differ in how farmers are going to use them, because AN has a tendency of leaching, hence it's recommended to be applied in splits, while urea, it tends to volatilize, to be taken up into the atmosphere, so it needs to be covered, particularly if it's not coated urea. Nowadays, because of advancements in technology, there is coated urea that farmers can use. This will release slowly and might not have a need to be covered. But this, you need to understand that fertilizers differ, and you need to seek advice from fertilizer experts that can give you a more detailed explanation on this. Then we also have foliar fertilizers, where farmers can come in with foliar fertilizers to boost the performance of their crops. And these are different depending on the source from which you are going to get them. Then we want to speak about Liebig's law of the minimum. Growth is dictated not by total resources available, but by the scarcest resource. This means that if all factors are held constant and everything is availed to the crop, growth would then be affected by that element that has become limited. Say, for example, if potassium, if zinc, if sulfur becomes limiting, it will then affect the whole value chain, regardless of the fact that you might have all the other elements on point. So it's important for us to understand all these macro elements, all these micro elements, because they affect each other in a ripple effect. So you need to understand how they work so that they give you the best results. Then in that colorful picture on the side there, we are seeing that those are maize leaves. A healthy looking maize leaf is lush green, shiny, showing no signs of deficiency. Then phosphate deficiency is usually depicted by a purplish color, while potassium deficiency has a characteristic potassium firing on the edges of the leaf, followed by a yellowing effect from the edges going inside the leaf. While nitrogen deficiency is a characteristic yellowing, which is almost uniform on the leaf. So you need to understand these differences so that once you go into your field to scout, you can give the correct recommendations and come in with the correct product that is desired. Then as we move towards concluding this first half of the presentation, in terms of the application of the soil conditioners, they also have a relationship with the tillage method that you're going to use. Suffice to say that all tillage methods can be used while you're applying your soil conditioner, conventional or conservation. Under conventional, you're going to come in with your primary tillage. Then you apply your soil conditioner, lime, gypsum, depending on soil analysis results. But remember that for acidic soils, it has to be lime. That is going to fix the acidity of the soil. Once you have applied your lime, you then incorporate it so that it goes within the root zone for it to work effectively. And once this is done, you can incorporate using this, then come in with a roller to create a fine till. But for conservation tillage, you need to understand that it differs depending on the scale of production. Where you find that for small scale farmers, under the Fumvuza program, you can still do soil analysis and come in with the correct remedial measures in a localized point where when Mr. Chikwari is going to speak, I'm sure he's going to tell us about precision. So when you're applying in your planting station, which you're going to be using over and over again, this speaks to precision farming. So you can still apply a lime in a Fumvuza plot once analysis has been done based on the results that you're going to get. Then on strip till or minimum tillage, you can also apply along the strips that you are going to be using consistently over the different cropping seasons. Then you need to understand that farming is guided by two main principles: access to good genetics and the employment of good agronomic practices. Farmers, there are 1,000 reasons for low yields, but there are only 2 reasons for farming profitably: the selection of the right seed from Seedco, guided by your agroecological region, and adopting good agronomic practices. So all this that we were speaking about today is about the soil, the main growing media, which is one facet of the good agronomic practices. So you need to understand that you need to get the right seed and couple that with the good agronomic practices to get the best results. Just to highlight that this year at Seedco, we have launched 2 new varieties, SC661 and SC657, which are in the medium maturity group. At Seedco, our thrust is to continuously bring about climate smart varieties that are going to increase on your crop profitability and productivity and add value in your cropping venture. So it's important for you to understand this and get to buy seed that is in line with your crop and your desired results. So in conclusion, soil is life. You need to conserve it. And the nation that destroys its soil, it destroys itself. These are the words of Franklin D. Roosevelt. And remember that COVID is real. You need to continue to mask up and make sure that you adhere to the COVID regulations that are being encouraged by health experts. Farming is a business. It starts with the right seed coupled with good agronomic practices. Thank you. So at this point, I'm going to respond to the 4 questions that we have received in the chat box before we invite Mr. Chikwari to come in and give us his presentation. Let me just quickly check to see if we have Mr. Chikwari. Okay, we have Mr. Chikwari, and he's going to be giving us the next presentation. But I'll just answer these questions, and if Mr. Chikwari has additions, we can come in. Is it practical to apply lime using a Vicon, and can uniformity be achieved? This is Stephen Jonga. You need to apply lime using the correct implement if you're going to be using a mechanical application. The lime box is the most desired implement to apply your lime with. But there are now more sophisticated machinery that is there, which can be used, which are lime spreaders and gypsum spreaders. But another thing that you need to understand are the conditions of the weather when you're applying your lime. If it's windy, you are not encouraged to apply at that time. You're also encouraged to apply earlier on in the day or later on in the day when wind conditions are also lower. Then we also want to respond to another question here. Our fields have pH of 5.5, 5.75. The report states that we do not need to lime. Kindly moderate this recommendation, for it's generally known that the optimum pH is between 6.3 for maximum fertilizer utilization. So these results, 5.5 to 6.5 is the range that is recommended, as you saw in the presentation that we gave. So it means your soils are within range. But for the soils that are at around 5.5, 5.7, it means you need to put your maintenance liming agents earlier than the soils that are at around 6.1, so that you keep your soil pH level within the range. At this point, in the interest of time, I'm going to hand over to Mr. Chikwari to give us his presentation, and then we'll respond to the questions that are going to be coming further on in the presentation. Thank you very much. Mr. Chikwari, over to you.
Hello, I'm there. Good morning, everyone. If Sister Wendy can help to share the presentation. Okay. Good morning, everyone. I wish to give my presentation on soil testing for improving crop productivity. We can go to next slide. In this first slide, I'm highlighting on the different soil testing services that are offered at Chemistry and Soil Research Institute. We have a national mandate of conducting research on soil, nutrient and water management for increased crop productivity. The Institute has soil testing laboratories that complement advisory services it offers to the agricultural sector. We have different laboratories, which include the Crop Nutrition Laboratory, Foliar Analysis Laboratory, Mechanical Analysis Laboratory, Soil Chemistry Laboratory, Soil Physics Laboratory, and then Soil Microbiology Laboratory. Let's move. What we need to know about our soils, these are key issues that should strike our minds whenever we are considering farming as an enterprise. Soil pH level, like Sister Wendy has been alluding to this, it's a very important condition before we consider any other thing. Soil nutrient status, the amount of nutrients in the soil, follows after having known the soil pH level. Then we also have soil physical conditions and soil biological conditions. Soil testing allows the farmer or agronomist or extension officer to understand the soil for sustainable management. Now, what is soil pH? Sister Wendy alluded to this, and I just want to maybe hammer a bit. Soil pH refers to the negative logarithm to base 10 of hydrogen ions in the soil. So the issue is hydrogen ion. We know there is hydrogen gas, but it can be hydrogen ion when it's dissolved in water. It is a measure of acidity or alkalinity of a soil and is measured on a scale from 1 to 14. Any acidic soil is one whose pH is below 7.0 units, while an alkaline soil has a pH above 7. So for crop production, yields are adversely affected when pH is below 5. Soil acidity affects nutrient availability and plant growth. Therefore, incorporation of lime materials into the soil to correct soil acidity has shown a number of beneficial effects. What causes this soil acidity? Because we continue to talk about soil acidity, but we may not know how it arises in the soil. We have acidic precipitation, that is hydrogen ions in precipitation, that is in rainfall. Because in the atmosphere, there are reactions that occur there, and the hydrogen ion is liberated, it falls together with rainfall, and it falls on the soil, acidifying the soils. Deposition from the atmosphere of acidifying gases or particles such as sulfur dioxide and nitric acid sorry, there was we have nitric acid and hydrochloric acid which occur in the atmosphere, and these fall together with rainfall, acidifying the soils. Then application of acidifying fertilizers such as elemental sulfur, urea, or ammonium salts. I think there's always been this myth, of course, that the use of ammonium nitrate, for example, or urea, it destroys our soils. It is because of this acidifying nature of these fertilizers. So what it calls for is, if a farmer is using ammonium nitrate or urea continuously, there must be a maintenance application of lime so that you maintain the pH at a optimum level, rather than continuously adding the ammonium nitrate or urea. Nutrient uptake by crops and root exudates. When the plants are growing, they take up nutrients. These nutrients, which normally result in acidification, are calcium, magnesium. If calcium and magnesium are taken up by plants, it means these nutrients, calcium and magnesium, they are alkaline elements. The moment they are taken up, it means what the balance that is left in the soil is an acidic medium. Then mineralization of organic matter. As organic matter is mineralized, there is chemistry that occurs that releases hydrogen ions into the soil. And consequently, we can have acidification of our medium. Then effects of acidity on nutrient availability. Aluminium toxicity is most notable at low pH. Sister Wendy talked about aluminium toxicity. Why? Because when pH is low, there are elements that prevail under acidic conditions, and aluminium is one. And this aluminium must not be in high amounts in the soil, otherwise it causes toxicity to our plants. Acidity also directly affects the crop, causing stunting and yellowing of leaves, resulting in the decrease in growth and yield of crops. Bacteria that fix atmospheric nitrogen are destroyed under acidic conditions. For example, we have Rhizobium inoculans, which we produce in Marondera. These Rhizobium inoculans, they are affected by pH. They will thrive when pH is above 6. Anything lower will destroy their activity in the soil. Let's go. Right, there's this scheme that is showing the variation of nutrient availability with pH, with different pH levels. Acidic conditions, then neutral conditions, then alkaline conditions on the far right. The neutral conditions are the conditions that are favorable for most nutrients. We have nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, sulfur. We find them dominating under this neutral environment. But under acidic conditions, we have micronutrients that also thrive under acidic conditions, whilst major nutrients become deficient. If we look at iron, manganese, copper, we also need them to be available, of course, in trace amounts. So I think there was that question which Sister Wendy answered before. When we are conditioning our soils, we need to ensure that these microelements are also available. So we don't necessarily need to correct our pH to that level of, say, like the question was above 6.5, that's the optimum. We want also to include this iron, manganese, and copper. So we keep a slight acidity rather than correcting acidity in total. Then we have under alkaline conditions, we have molybdenum, for example, is highly available under alkaline conditions. So you'll find that in our advisory services, we try to balance all this to look at the situation and advise on the pH level that goes with the different nutrients availability. Let's move. Okay. This table is simply showing like nitrogen. It's highly available between 6 and 8 pH. Phosphorus between 6.5 and 7.5. Potassium and sulfur above 6. Calcium and magnesium 7 to 8.5. Iron less than 6. Manganese 5 to 6.5. Boron, copper, and zinc 5 to 7. Then molybdenum greater than 7. So you see each element has its own specific range, and we have balance accordingly. This was presented by Sister Wendy. You'll find that in soil science, there are a lot of issues that are in common. I may not need to explain more, but let us look at effect of liming on maize grain yield from the research that we conducted some years back in Zimba, Mondoro, and Gut, showing maize grain yield in tons per hectare, depending on the pH level. You will find that unlimed was giving very low yields compared to limed in all the sites that we had that demonstration. This picture is showing the crop stand of unlimed patch of the field compared to a patch that was limed to pH 5.5. So this is the situation when we do not lime our soils. The soil, the crops are standard, and you can agree with me that there is no yield that can come out from such a soil. Rather, it will be just a poor yield, poor harvest, and it may be continuously like that if the soils are not conditioned. Let's move. How much lime should be applied? Some crops are more sensitive to soil acidity than others. So each crop has its own specific pH range where it performs to its best. Therefore, the target soil pH depends on the crops to be grown. So that's why when someone brings their sample, they have to declare which crop they want to grow so that we recommend according to the crop needs. It is also a function of organic matter content of the soil, cation exchange capacity, the cost of liming, and the rate at which soils become acidic. Some terminologies are a bit difficult to comprehend, like cation exchange capacity, but all it's saying is there is exchange of nutrient ions in the soil, because the soil itself is a charge. It is generally a negative charge. So any positive ion will attract to the soil, and the one element that is more dominant will displace the other element. So if hydrogen ions predominate, it means hydrogen ions now occupy the exchange site, removing calcium, magnesium, the nutrients that we want, and the soil becoming even more acidic. And it will be difficult to analyze. That is the reason why we use the calcium chloride scale. When we introduce calcium chloride, we are introducing calcium ions to displace all the hydrogen ions that are in the exchange sites, so that when we measure the acidity of the medium, we have all the hydrogen ions that were even hidden on exchange sites. That is the essence of using the calcium chloride scale. Target pH is for maize-based cropping systems is 5.5. Whilst for legumes, it's 6.0. Let's move. What about managing our soil nutrients? Once the soil conditions are addressed, balanced nutrition ensures optimized crop productivity. The three main nutrients are nitrogen, phosphorus, and potassium, which we commonly know as NPK. I think every farmer can call this with ease NPK, because they are the major nutrient elements. Other important nutrients are calcium, magnesium, and sulfur. However, we have also the micronutrients: iron, manganese, copper, zinc, boron, and molybdenum. These are required in small amounts, trace amounts. If acidity persists, it means they will be in higher amounts and it will be disastrous. Sister Wendy talked about this again. The Liebig law of the minimum is basically plant growth, which is determined by the nutrient in the shortest supply. It is therefore important to have balanced nutrition in order to get optimum yields. So this Liebig's law of the minimum applies to all conditions of plant growth, be it water, be it light, be it soil nutrients. Then the 4R stewardship. The 4R stewardship, this has been articulated by Sister Wendy in a different way. It only demonstrates that on nutrient management, we have to have proper nutrient application. And the 4 R's stand for right source, right rate, right time, and right place, and serve to guide farmers to the management practices that help keep nutrients on and in the field. Then this one, okay, we can move. Then this one, I hope you can see it clearly. It's a schematic presentation of soil analysis results, whereby it shows a reference from the farmer, which we call your reference. We have our own laboratory reference, then we have the farmer's reference, because we have to link the soil to your reference. Otherwise, they will be mixed up. So you give your own reference. Then we have analysis of texture. It's presented there also. Then pH. Then the next, the mineral, nitrogen, phosphorus, then calcium, magnesium, potassium. And all these are presented as an example. You will find that where the value for pH is 4. I'm using a phone, so sometimes I cannot see clearly. When the pH is like 4.3, we go to the recommendation that follows. That will be on the next part of this scheme. We recommend, okay. Okay, then the second part is recommending the different levels, like pH, nitrogen, phosphorus, potassium, then the fertilizers identified by name, compound D, AN identified also, and the rates to be applied is given, and the application method, like initial application, IA, then top dressing application, and the like. So it's important that our farmers be able to understand this kind of advisory note that we give to them. Let's move. There is nothing. There is nothing.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chikwari, for that detailed presentation. So here we have a question from Sydney Mwalo. He's asking, for a soil test, what is the general indicative cost? For a soil test, what is the general indicative cost?
Okay, for fertilizer for lime and fertilizer recommendations, for the purpose of lime and fertilizer recommendations, it's $15. Although we have other parameters that can be measured that are not necessarily for lime and fertilizer recommendations, we have costs for those. But for a farmer who just want to have lime and fertilizer recommendations, let them be prepared to have $15 US, but it's paid at auction rate prevailing.
Okay,
for that
thank
week.
you. Thank you very much. Then maybe you may just also highlight the decentralization process that you are embarking on as the Minister of Agriculture, so that soil sampling can become more accessible to farmers across the country.
Okay. Yeah. Since last year, 2020, the ministry has rolled out the decentralization exercise, so that we have at least a substation in each province, so that we take the soil testing services to all the corners of the country. This is work in progress. We have acquired quite substantial materials for this exercise, and I'm sure towards the rain season, we should have a full swing analysis happening in various provinces. It is quite a blessing to the country to have our seniors, the Honorable Minister, Dr. Masuka, and the Permanent Secretary, Dr. Basera. They came in full swing to have this exercise effected. So it is not something that is going to go behind. We are pursuing this seriously.
Thank you very much. Then the two last questions that I would like for you to give a response to. There is a question from Stephen Jonga. Is it practical to apply lime using a Vicon, and can uniformity be achieved? That's the first question. Then the last one that would want you to answer, also from Stephen Jonga. Do pre-emergent herbicides affect the soil microorganisms?
The last one, can you please come again on it?
Okay. Do pre-emergent herbicides affect soil microorganisms?
Yeah. You know, agrochemicals, they interfere with the environment, especially with fauna. So definitely there is an effect. That's why it's not some corners do not recommend the use of pesticides, chemical pesticides. That's why they are going organic or bio pesticides or others that are safe to use in the environment. It's obvious that if you apply herbicides continuously, in the end, if you determine the ecological status of the soil, there will be diminishing presence of certain organisms. Then the first question.
Okay, the first question was on the application of lime. What application tool would you recommend? And do farmers just need machinery, or they can just also hand apply?
Okay. You will find that if it is a machinery, the first thing to do is to have an understanding of calibration of your applicator. If it is not well calibrated, then it means you offload more than is required. So calibration is the first thing to do, so that as it is moving, it's applying the right amount, that is the right rate throughout the field. But not every farmer will have such applicators. We can use hand application, whereby you can calibrate yourself how you apply your lime by spreading with your hands, how you apply, covering a certain segment of the field, moving at a certain pace. And you know that, for example, suppose you have calibrated with a bucket, to say this bucket should be equivalent to an area which is maybe 1,000 square meters. Then you run with that bucket to make sure it covers that specific area. So it's not something difficult. Like you said when it's windy, then it's a big blow. Of course, when you are spreading using your hands, it becomes, choking, or you tend to waste some of the lime.
Thank you very much, Mr. Shkwari, for all your responses. We also have a question here that I'm going to respond to from Anonymous. Some areas struggled with access to lime. Is there a way of ensuring access to lime across the country? Thank you very much for that question. It would seem that last season, there were some efforts from the government to decentralize this lime and have it being located at different GMB depots. And as of yesterday, when we were in Mashonaland Central, the provincial agri-tax officer was mentioning that the uptake of that lime was quite low, to the extent that it's still there from last season. So the lime is there, but some of the issues that were being raised were on transportation of the lime because it's bulky. So the recommendations were that people can form groups and find a way to just carry some of the lime. And I'm sure Mr. Chipari would agree that sometimes liming is not an immediate, it's not a quick fix. So you can apply your lime and then you can go in and get the additional lime and come and apply it gradually because it doesn't fix overnight the condition of the soil. So lime was available and it's available in most GMBs. You can engage the Agri-Tax extension officers for more information on that. Then outside of that, you can also engage agrochemical companies. There's your ZFC, you can go to Windmill Omnia, you can also go to Lafarge, they have lime, and you would find that lime is one of the most economic fertilizer or conditioner, soil conditioners that is available on the market, ranging between $7 to around $9, depending on where you buy it for a 50 kg bag. So it's available across the country. It's just a matter of contacting the relevant people and the relevant experts so that you can find where you can buy it from the closest proximity to you. Then we have a question here from Cosma Mukuna. Why do we continue using chemical fertilizers which affect our health, data, and the upsurge of cancers? Suffice to say that this is a question that might be outside of our scope for today's presentation. I'm sure the fertilizer companies will be in a better position to answer on the possible measures that are in place to try and mitigate the effects of chemical fertilizer in the soil. But there is a general talk of sustainable agriculture globally, and we are also advocating for farmers to use organic fertilizers in conjunction with their inorganic fertilizers so that they reduce the rates that they are using. And also soil analysis helps for you to do custom-made fertilizer recommendations so that you're just not over-applying fertilizers unnecessarily. So that's one way in which mitigation is being done. But the why element, I'm sure we are not in the right space to be conclusively giving a response to that. But thank you for that question. Then we also have a question here that we got through our Facebook page from Lloyd Villengelanga. He was quite grateful for the presentation and indicated that it was informative. Thank you very much for that feedback. We really appreciate it. Then we have Fiona Kandoro, who was asking about the availability of 555 in small packs in Bulawayo. Thank you for joining us all the way from Bulawayo. Thank you. We have agronomists at SEEDCO scattered across the country who you can engage on the availability of these fertilizers. But suffice to say, we have distributed our seed through our different distribution networks, our agro dealers, our depots. There is seed currently available in different pack sizes. So for Bulawayo, our agronomist is Wallace Banda. You can engage Wallace Banda, and we are going to just type his number on the chat box so that you can be assisted by our agronomist. Suffice to say, we have an agronomist in every province. Then we have a question from Marshall. He's asking about the availability of sugar beans. Well-timed, Marshall, because sugar bean production, the window for soon after winter is almost approached. As soon as we pass this frost window that we are having, you'll be able to plant your sugar beans. We have sugar bean available at SEEDCO, but you can engage our sales office for the availability at different locations, as well as the costs and pack sizes, as well as the varieties that are available in stock at the moment. Thank you very much for those questions. So now, as we move to round up, we'd just like to thank you all for joining us for this well-timed presentation on the importance of soil sampling and liming. Suffice to say that everyone who has been joining, please spread the word. Make sure that soil sampling is taken to the next level as a country. We want to increase our awareness of our soil conditions so that productivity can go to the next level. Would also like to thank Mr. Chikwari for joining us today, our experts in terms of soil analysis issues. Thank you, Mr. Chikwari, for highlighting those key issues and giving us those jaw breakers in terms of some of those words that you were explaining there and demystifying them as well. Thank you very much, Mr. Chikwari, for that. So on that note, I'd like to thank you for joining us. This webinar has been recorded. The link is going to be shared for future reference. Thank you. We wish you a pleasant day and stay safe in light of COVID. Thank you very much. The meeting has come to an end.
Thank you.
Thank you.